Hi, I'm Caleb from Moto Alliance, and today we're going to teach you how to do some basic troubleshooting with your winch. As you can see, I'm using a Viper Max 5,000 pound winch for this demonstration, but these concepts should hold true across the vast majority of winches on the market today. One of the first things I do anytime I'm troubleshooting a winch is make sure that all the connections are clean and secure and that it's wired up correctly. As you can see with my setup here, I've got the black and the red posts on the contactor run right over here to the positive and the negative posts on the battery. And I've got the blue and the yellow posts on the contactor run over here to the blue and the yellow posts on the winch. Some contactors and some winches, across the industry will be slightly different, with regards to what colors they're using, but the general concepts are all the same. As long as you make sure that the two running from the battery into the contactor are correct and the two running out are correct, you should be fine. Another thing to note is that not all contactors wire up the same. If you look on the posts of this one, the black and the red are across from each other and the blue and the yellow are across from each other. That's the way our MX228 contactor wires up, but others will run with the black and the red on one side and the blue and the yellow on another side. It just depends, so pay attention to that because it will change among different models. Okay, now that I've got my power wires all tested and checked, I'm going to move on to the switches. Now with the Max 5000, you get a handlebar rocker switch and a corded remote switch. Although with the Viper Elite, you'd get a wireless and other winches will have different switches, but the concept should be the exact same. For this, I've wired both of the power supply wires together. So the power supply wire from my rocker switch is into the power supply wire for my corded remote. And I've got them both running over here to the battery. It's very important that these power supply wires have 12 volts. Normally you're going to wire this up to a keyed power source like an auxiliary wire or a cigarette lighter. But for the purpose of this test, I've run them directly to the battery. As long as it's got 12 volts, you should be okay. The other thing to check with the switches is to make sure that the black and the green wires coming from the switch are securely plugged into your contactor. I can't tell you how many times I've had guys come to me and say, my winch is only working one direction, or it works sometimes and not other times. And when I dig into it, I found that in the process of rewiring or moving something, they've jiggled one of those loose. And if it's loose, it's not going to work. So that's one of the simple things you can do to save yourself a lot of headache, is just make sure all those connections are really clear, really secure, no rust, nothing like that on them. All right, now that we've checked all of our wiring and we're pretty confident that everything's set up correctly, now we can get down to diagnosing what the problem really is. One of the fastest ways to fix your winch and to troubleshoot it is just to isolate the problem. The first thing I always do is just listen for the winch motor. If you're pressing your switch and you can hear the winch motor turning, but the spool isn't engaging, the winch isn't actually pulling, then you can be pretty confident that your wiring and everything is good, but there's an issue with the internals of the winch, either the free spool knob or something in the gear end or the spool isn't engaging properly. Now if you press the button, you get nothing out of the winch. The next test is to figure out, is the issue in the winch motor itself or is it in the winch wiring? The fastest way to test this is to take a pair of jumper cables and just hook direct power up to the winch. All right, as you can see, we've got the jumper cables connected to our battery now. So now we're going to come over here and connect direct power to the winch. As always, make sure you're using proper safety glasses for this. All right, so first we're going to connect our ground wire to the bottom here. Get a nice clean connection. And second, we're going to attach to this top one. You're just going to want to tap it the first time or two just to see if you get some spark. Make sure it doesn't have a dead short. Some sparking is okay. You'll find if you just tap it, you get the spark. But if you put a nice firm connection on, it should run. So now that we've tested that, we're actually going to switch this around. I'm going to put the positive on the bottom, and I'll take the negative up here, and now it should run the same, just in the opposite direction. So once again, a little pop, nothing to worry about there. Nice firm connection though, and it's running the opposite direction. All right, so we've tested our winch with direct power. If you hook up direct power and the winch doesn't work, then you know that the problem is most likely in the winch motor, probably a burnt motor coil or a bad brush or some sort of bad connection. If the winch does run, however, then we can narrow it down to the electrical system. Since we already verified all of our wiring and we're assuming the battery's good since we hooked it up to direct power, we can pretty much narrow it down to either the contactor solenoid or the switches. The easiest way to isolate the problem, to determine whether it's in the switches or in the contactor, is to test both switches and compare. Now I've got a handlebar rocker switch and a corded remote here, but this would work the same with a dash switch or a wireless. Since it's very unlikely that both switches are going to fail at the exact same time in the exact same way, we can usually determine that if both the switches are behaving the same, the problem's in the contactor solenoid, and if they're behaving differently, the problem is in the switch that isn't working. So for this one, I'm going to try the corded remote first. I tested it's working. The handlebar switch is working. So if we had any problems, we would know that the problem was in the contactor. If you've got a multimeter or want to get a little deeper into testing your winch, understanding the relationship between voltage and winch power, we're going to be making another video shortly detailing that. But for now, hopefully this gives you a nice basis for how to troubleshoot your winch and how to isolate the problem. Half the time, if you can just isolate the problem, it's a very easy swap. Thanks for watching. As always, if you have any questions or comments or ideas for future videos, just leave them in the comment section below. If you like this video, like it. If you want more, like it, subscribe. Have a nice day.